Henry didn't hate his wife, bless him. He was just a little ashamed of her, so he took his mistress to a business meeting as his wife. He thought he had everything under control, but what was about to happen at that meeting would leave him completely shocked. Henry had built a life of prestige and power. He was the image of a successful entrepreneur in his luxurious office. He cut an impressive figure, exuding confidence as he navigated business deals and armed his associates. On the surface, he was the epitome of achievement, a man who seemed to have it all. In the early days, Megan was Henry's rock. She believed in him and helped him achieve the success he craved. She was the rock of their home, managing their daily lives and always there for him through thick and thin. Together, they shared dreams, laughed at challenges and seemed the perfect couple to face the world. Megan was a gentle, unassuming soul, a stark contrast to the glamorous life Henry now wanted for himself. She was a bit of a wallflower at company parties and business meetings, but that didn't stop her from being a wonderful, supportive wife. Henry didn't think it was a good idea to take Megan to these events, as he felt she wasn't the right person to represent his success. And then, along came Phoebe. Phoebe was everything Megan wasn't. She was youthful, captivating and confident, and she loved being the center of attention and enjoying the finer things in life. Phoebe was the ideal companion for Henry's business dealings because she loved attention and luxury. He started taking her to important dinners and introducing her as his partner at social events. Phoebe was a real charmer and everyone couldn't help but admire her. Henry was really proud to have her by his side. Their affair deepened with each business meeting, and Phoebe became a permanent fixture in his double life. She noticed how often he was away on business, and the odd excuses he made for it. Meanwhile, Henry continued to make plans with Phoebe, feeling like he had the upper hand. Henry was really lucky because an amazing opportunity came up. He got to have a private meeting with some foreign investors. This wasn't just another business deal. It was a chance to take his company to new heights, with millions on the line. Henry knew that to seal this deal, he'd have to do more than just show off his financial know-how. He'd have to wow the investors. He thought about asking Megan to come with him to the meeting, but decided against it. Megan, he thought to himself with a little smile, imagining her reserved demeanor in the company of these high-powered businessmen. She might not have the sparkle and charisma he felt was essential to captivate the investors, but she would do her best. Henry was really happy with his choice. He decided that Phoebe would come with him to this important meeting. He thought that her presence would be just the thing to help him seal the deal. He saw her as the missing piece to his success, the allure that would captivate the investors and elevate his position in their eyes. He just knew she'd be the one to help him achieve all of this. With Phoebe by his side, Henry was sure that everything would go perfectly and they'd seal the deal without a hitch. However, Henry was really careful not to let on to Megan that he was going away on a trip. He really couldn't risk any mistakes. He had to make sure he executed his plan carefully to ensure that Megan was kept in the dark. That evening, Henry sat down to dinner with Megan and took the first step in his plan. As she served the meal with her usual gentle smile, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Henry started the conversation with a casual, "Love," as he cut into his steak. "I wanted to let you know that the important meeting I mentioned is finally arranged. I'm going to be away for just a day or two later this week, but it's really important to closing a major contract, so I hope you understand." "Of course, dear. I know this is really important to you. If you need any help packing, just let me know." Henry managed a composed smile, hiding his satisfaction at how smoothly his plan was unfolding. He knew Megan trusted him completely and would never suspect his true intentions. "Thank you, dear, but that won't be necessary." The moment of reckoning was approaching, and Henry was completely unprepared for what lay ahead. It was going to be a quick and intense trip. He liked to travel light without too much baggage. Besides, this would be a great opportunity to seal that $1 million deal he'd told her about. The investors were we've got to make a great impression on them. I'm sure this will be a fantastic opportunity for the company. Henry was so confident, you'd have thought he was already there. Megan was really impressed by his dedication to his work, but she had no idea that he'd been planning this trip for ages to be with his partner. In Henry's mind, everything was falling into place. He had arranged every detail to ensure that Phoebe would be available for the trip the next day. He called her in his usual confident tone, his voice brimming with excitement. Henry on the phone to Phoebe. Phoebe, the meeting with the foreign investors is set. I really hope you'll be on my side, it's going to be a big event and I know you'll make all the difference. Phoebe smiled, excited to step into her new role as Henry's business partner. Everything was just perfect. Henry could already see the scene in his mind, him and Phoebe entering the meeting room, the approving looks of the investors, the signing of a lucrative contract. While Megan would stay at home, unaware of the truth, trusting in the facade of a husband devoted to his career. But Henry didn't realize that, no matter how carefully he planned everything, something unexpected was waiting to shake his confidence and shatter his illusion of control. The day of the trip to Argentina arrived, and Henry, beaming from ear to ear and looking dapper in a tailored suit, arrived at the airport with Phoebe, who turned heads with every step she took. She looked absolutely gorgeous in an elegant dress that showed off her figure perfectly and exuded a real sense of sophistication. Henry felt sure that this would be the key to winning over the investors once they landed in Buenos Aires. Henry and Phoebe made their way straight to the gorgeous conference room in the hotel where the meeting would be held. The setting was really lovely and sophisticated. There was a large polished wooden table in the center surrounded by black leather chairs, and the walls were decorated with modern art and huge windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. The air was thick with excitement. This contract had the potential to change the future of his company, and Henry was determined to do his best. Henry strode into the room with a confident air, passing the receptionist without so much as a glance, and made his way directly to the table where 3 investors were waiting for him, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and an aura of authority, a rather ordinary-looking woman who exuded confidence, and another man who seemed more relaxed, but just as attentive. He took a seat at the head of the table, with Phoebe right beside him. The investors were watching them closely, and Henry could feel their eyes drifting to Phoebe, which only added to his confidence. He was really happy to have her there with him. He introduced her with a little bit of pride before we got started. Phoebe offered a polite smile, but Henry couldn't help but notice the subtle reaction of the female investor. She raised an eyebrow, seemingly assessing the situation, though Henry interpreted it as a positive response. The woman's slight smile suggested something more guarded, but Henry was sure she was interested. "Bonjour, it's a pleasure to meet you, Phoebe," the female investor said in a warm, measured tone. Her English had a lovely French accent, which added an air of refinement. She wore dark sunglasses, thick black hair that cascaded around her shoulders, and her bangs just barely covered one side of her face. "I'm sure you have valuable insights to share with us," Henry replied with a warm smile. "Miss, you're absolutely right. Phoebe has a unique vision of the market, and her contribution will be crucial to our success." The female investor offered no more. Then, with a nod, Henrielle launched into his proposal with renewed enthusiasm. He presented charts and figures while Phoebe nodded attentively at key moments. He seemed deeply engaged as he gestured with conviction, declaring that our company is on the brink of success. Our company is on the verge of a major breakthrough. This contract is a great opportunity for profit, and it's also a wonderful step towards an innovative future. With your help, we can reach for the stars. The male investors seemed really interested, but Henry could tell that the female investors were a little more reserved. It was clear that their attention wasn't solely on the figures. It seemed like they were trying to figure out how they felt about him and Phoebe, even though he was feeling more and more confident. I noticed in your last report that you mentioned the need for some structural changes. I'd love to hear more about how you plan to implement them. Henry smiled, trying to regain his sense of control. Absolutely. We're more than happy to integrate new technologies that will increase our efficiency by 30%. This is great news for our company. Not only will we see higher profits, but we'll also be able to provide an even better service to our clients. As he spoke, the atmosphere began to change. The female investor's gaze sharpened as if she was assessing something beyond the presentation. Henry felt his confidence begin to waver under her scrutiny. He pressed on, ignoring the growing knot of discomfort in his chest. How do you plan to deal with governance issues that may arise with the implementation of these innovations? She asked, her tone now direct and challenging. We really value our partnerships and we're committed to maintaining an open dialogue with all of our partners. We're committed to being as open and transparent as we can be, and we're ready to address any concerns that come up along the way. As he carried on, he suddenly had a little warning bell go off in his head. He hadn't expected things to get so complicated, and Phoebe's presence, which was supposed to be his greatest support, didn't seem to be having the effect he'd hoped for. The investor was quiet for a moment, but she kept her eyes on him. The atmosphere in the room became more and more tense, and Henry found himself grappling with an unsettling realization: charm and appearances would not be enough to manipulate this situation. He had underestimated his audience and overestimated his own influence. She removed her sunglasses, revealing dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to read through him. She addressed Henry in fluent, polished French, her voice cool and unyielding. Miss Henry, charm alone will not secure this partnership. You must show real commitment and understanding. Otherwise, I'm afraid our expectations will not be met. Henry felt his composure slip, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. He nodded, struggling to maintain his smile. Of course, madam, I understand perfectly, he replied, although he felt anything but confident. He knew that this woman was not easily swayed and that the illusion of control he had so carefully created was beginning to crumble under the weight of her scrutiny. The investor continued. Henry, I'm sure you can see my concern, but I'd love to hear more about how your company plans to maintain control of the infrastructure with this expansion. I've noticed some recent changes in management, so I'm curious to know how you're dealing with that. Henry paused for a moment, taken aback. The depth of the question took him by surprise. He hadn't prepared himself for questions about internal management. He thought quickly, trying to regain his composure and maintain his confidence. He replied with a smile, yes, we are adjusting our team to ensure efficient management, and well, we have trained professionals to handle any changes that may arise. The woman smiled slightly, as if she was expecting this answer. She leaned forward, keeping her gaze fixed on Henry, and the once controlled atmosphere began to shift. I hear the new CFO has made some big changes to the operation. Are you familiar with the new resource allocation policy he's implemented? Henry blinked, a little confused. How on earth did she know about the recent hire? He hadn't had much time to get to know the new CFO, and the operational changes were being managed by his subordinates, which made him feel a little out of the loop. Henry stammered, trying to keep his composure. Oh, absolutely. We're definitely aligning our strategies, and everything's totally under control. Phoebe looked at him with a little frown, realizing that something was wrong. Miss Henry's smile began to fade and he felt a little shiver run down his spine. This woman was no ordinary investor, she knew too much. But how was that possible? Then the investor leaned forward ever so slightly and with an almost playful smile, she slowly began to remove her wig. The false hair slipped easily to reveal the dark, wavy locks of Megan Henry, Henry's wife, whom he had never imagined he would see there. Henry was so surprised, he felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His heart was racing, and he stood frozen. It was as if the ground beneath his feet had vanished. He blinked repeatedly, trying to understand what was happening. But then the truth hit him like a thunderbolt. He stammered in disbelief, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Megan, what are you doing here?" he asked. Megan, now stripped of her disguise, kept her gaze fixed on Henry. Phoebe, standing next to her, was completely taken aback. Megan, wearing an expression of calm and control, spoke slowly and clearly. "I am one of the major investors in your company, Henry. While you were busy trying to deceive me and parading around with your mistress, I was quietly building my own empire. Oh, Henry, I knew everything. Every move you made, every meeting you attended. And now I control a significant part of your business." Henry felt the color drain from his face. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The revelation was like an avalanche, like an earthquake, like a hurricane. The revelation was like an avalanche, taking every ounce of his confidence and leaving him feeling like everything he thought he was in control of was slipping through his fingers in a whisper. Still a little dazed, Henry muttered, "No, this can't be true, you," with a little smile. Megan replied with a superior smile. "Oh, Henry, you thought I wasn't good enough for your business, but I was quietly accumulating shares and influence in the company, making shrewd investments, and now here I am, the woman you never imagined controlling more than you ever did." I could just picture the other two investors looking at Henry with a mixture of surprise and mild contempt. It all made sense now. Poor Henry was completely exposed and vulnerable. He tried to compose himself, but his hands trembled slightly as he looked at Megan, still in disbelief, desperate to regain some control. Henry asked, "But why? Megan, my love, why did you do this? We're married, after all." Megan's voice was calm but her words stung a little. "It seems you've forgotten that more times than I can count, my dear. And as for being the CEO, well, maybe you should pay more attention to what's going on in your marriage." The silence in the room was overwhelming. Henry glanced at Phoebe, hoping for some kind of support, but she stood there stunned and unsure of how to react. His face was tense, his hands clammy. He had completely lost control of the situation. Henry pleaded with a shaking voice, "Megan, please, we can fix this. I can make things right. It doesn't have to be this way." Megan replied in a cold and relentless tone. "Henry, I'm really sorry, but I feel like you betrayed me and disrespected me. It seems like you thought I was just a piece of furniture in your life. I'm really sorry, but it's too late for regrets now. I'm in control, and you, well, you're going to have to face the consequences of your actions." Henry sank back in his chair and felt the weight of the world crumbling around him. Everything he had built, his image, his business, was crumbling before his eyes. It was a sad moment for him, as he realized that the person he had always underestimated was the one who was bringing him down. Megan, the other investors and even Phoebe were staring at him. Even Phoebe was staring at him, but she didn't say anything. Henry suddenly realized that he'd been a bit arrogant. He'd thought that he was in control of everything and everyone around him, but now he saw that it was actually his wife who had been in control all along. He'd underestimated Megan, assuming that she was totally unaware of his actions, but unbeknownst to Henry, Megan was actually more perceptive than he gave her credit for. Instead of confronting him directly, she quietly watched him piece together the fragments of his betrayal, despite her growing suspicions. Megan was the picture of patience, biding her time and waiting for the perfect moment to act. Unlike Henry, she had played the game with flawless precision. After the initial shock, Henry was still trying to process his wife's presence in that boardroom. Megan, on the other hand, remained calm as if everything had been part of a perfectly orchestrated plan. The silence in the room seemed to stretch on forever until Megan decided to speak up, sharing her truth with a calm and measured approach. It wasn't too difficult to figure out what you were up to. You've always been pretty open about your actions. I saw it right away, from that first curious look to that first half-baked excuse. But I decided to let time work in my favor instead of confronting you. Henry was still a bit dazed and tried to keep his cool, but his breathing was a little uneven. He glanced at the other investors, but they were all just sitting there, waiting for this awkward moment to pass. Megan, I can explain. It wasn't like that. Megan interrupted him with a piercing look. She explained, you betrayed me with Phoebe. You treated me like an obstacle. You despised me. You underestimated me. She continued, I already know. All of that is beside the point now. The real question is what I did while you thought you were in control. She paused, crossing her arms and facing Henry, who now looked utterly defeated. He felt his heart racing as if an invisible chain was holding him back. While you were busy, I was building something, watching, learning, and slowly studying. I was also buying shares in your company and investing, making decisions that you couldn't even imagine. And now, as you can see, I am one of the major investors. I've been watching you for years, and I've seen you stumble a few times, but I've never worried. I always knew that everything would fall into place at the right moment, and it has. Henry began to sweat profusely. The weight of what Megan was revealing was overwhelming. He had always believed himself to be the genius behind the company's success, but now he realized there was a much greater, more strategic force orchestrating everything. What he had thought was his personal victory was actually something much bigger. Henry, his voice trembling with desperation, tried to protest, but Megan cut him off. You can't, she said, her voice icy. You're the CEO. Destroy the company. The company, Henry, I'm not you. I've worked really hard to make it a success, while you were busy keeping up appearances. I was the one who was truly in control, you were just a face, a facade. If there's anyone who can look after this company, it's me. She paused dramatically, watching. The effect of her words washed over Henry. Now he was beginning to realize just how vulnerable he really was. Not just his image, but his business was crumbling before his eyes. Megan added with a slight smile, I'm so proud of you. This meeting I organized, it's all down to you. I wanted to give you a chance to show everyone who you really are. I thought it would be really interesting to watch you bring your partner to a meeting I arranged, trying to sell your perfect image. And guess what, you didn't disappoint. Now everyone here knows who you really are. Henry glanced around, feeling the weight of the other investors on the stairs. The men beside Megan kept neutral expressions, but he knew they must be thinking the same thing. Henry, you know I'm here to support you, but I think you'll agree that your behavior was not entirely professional. I'm sure you didn't mean to come across in that way, but Megan, looking at him with utter contempt, replied, you never imagined, because you never paid any attention to me, you thought I was just a simple woman, incapable of understanding. Business was a bit of a burden for you, Henry, but while you were busy betraying me, I was busy preparing myself. You might have underestimated the wrong person, Henry. He tasted the bitterness of defeat in his mouth for the first time. He was faced with the harsh reality that everything he thought he controlled, including his wife, was slipping away from his grasp. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and he knew he was on the brink of losing not only his wife but also his reputation and possibly the company he was so proud of. Megan delivered her final blow with relentless determination. Henry, I'm sorry to say that the company doesn't need you. I can and will do it all on my own now. You can go on parading around with your lovers, but understand that when it comes to the business, you are nobody. This was your last mistake." The silence in the room was thick and heavy. Henry looked at Phoebe, hoping for some kind of support, but she seemed as lost as he was. Was she avoiding his gaze, probably realizing that she had been drawn into something much bigger than she had imagined? With nothing more to say, Henry lowered his head, utterly defeated. He had lost respect, trust, and now possibly even the company he once cherished. Megan, however, stood calmly, addressing the other investors with a confident posture. She announced, "Now that we've cleared things up, we can proceed with the partnership details." The investors nodded, recognizing Megan as the true leader in the room. Poor Henry. He just stood there, silent, knowing that everything he had built, both personally and professionally, was in ruins. He felt totally helpless, and he knew that from now on he was just going to have to watch his own downfall happen. He was the man who had always believed he was in control, and now he felt utterly abandoned. Abandoned, his once unshakable confidence had crumbled, leaving behind a deep sense of humiliation and regret. Megan was now standing, clearly in command. She took one last look at him before she spoke, her voice firm and resonant in the room. "Henry, regarding the company," Megan began, her tone steady but authoritative. She paused and looked at him, her expression calm and a little wry. "I'll let you think about all this for a while, Henry. You've got time to process everything." He tried to respond, but his throat was dry and the words wouldn't come out. He knew that any attempt to fix things at this moment would be futile. Megan held not only the reins of the company but also the fate of his life in her hands. Phoebe realized there was no place for her in this scene and felt the weight of confusion and discomfort. Pushing herself, she glanced briefly at Henry, but he didn't even register her presence. All she saw in him was a poor, defeated man, a broken reflection of the confident figure she thought she was dealing with. Without a word, Phoebe rose from her chair with as much discretion as possible, moving quickly and quietly, slipping out of the room, avoiding the eyes of the investors or Megan. She knew that her presence there was now irrelevant and that everyone would soon be distracted by other things. Phoebe walked away, not really paying much attention. After all, the lover was just a tiny piece in the much bigger picture that Megan had created. She was totally focused on Henry and how he had underestimated her intelligence and patience over the years. The other investors began to gather their documents, already aware that the purpose of the meeting had completely changed. They cast respectful glances at Megan, impressed by her attitude and control of the situation. They were happy to see that she was in charge and that she would be making decisions regarding the company partnership from now on. Turning to them, Megan offered a warm smile and spoke with confidence, "Thank you all so much for your patience. We'll be in touch soon to discuss the next steps, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing the company flourish under these new decisions." With a gentle click, the door closed, marking the end of the meeting. It was a bittersweet moment. While it should have been a triumph for Henry, it had sadly become his greatest defeat. As everyone left, Megan gave Henry one last look. He remained seated, his hands trembling. He was sitting on the table, looking a little older in a matter of minutes. It was as if the news Megan had given him had knocked him for six. She said her final words without a hint of emotion. "When I'm ready, you'll know my decision," she said. "In the meantime, why not take this time to think about what you could have done better?" With that, she turned and left the room, leaving poor Henry alone. The door closed gently, and the sound echoed in Henry's mind like the end of an era. He was left there, completely and utterly alone. Bottles on the table, the grandeur of his meeting room a distant memory, replaced by the echoing silence of a life stripped down to its bare bones. He was no longer the man in control, no longer the one giving orders. The realization hit him with every passing second, with every breath that felt heavier than the last. He reached for his phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything that would mean he wasn't really alone in this new reality. But the screen remained blank, as did his future with Megan. Her voice was steady and unrelenting. He had laughed at the thought of her being capable of action, let alone revenge, but she had taken his arrogance and used it as the very foundation of his downfall. Henry had underestimated her, assuming her silence meant submission. Now all he could hear was the silence of his own downfall. He let out a hollow chuckle. Fate had a twisted sense of irony when the official message arrived. Henry skimmed the words, but their meaning did not sink in. His heart was beating fast and beads of sweat were forming on his forehead as he read the notice again, more slowly this time, trying to grasp the reality that Megan had filed a lawsuit months ago. His hands were trembling, making it hard to hold the paper steady, and he could hardly believe what he was reading. The division of assets, majority ownership and control of the company, it all felt like a bit of a dream, a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. The court's decision was pretty swift, and it was a bit of a shock. Megan's quiet acquisitions over the years had paid off, and she'd got the company she'd always dreamed of. Her contributions, which Henry had previously thought were insignificant, were now the most important part of the case. The gavel struck with finality, and with it Henry's illusion of power shattered. He was no longer the master of his destiny. Megan held all the cards and she played them with precision. Henry's world continued to unravel when Megan sacked Phoebe without ceremony, sending a cold, impersonal email, "Your services are no longer required." Phoebe had been a fixture at Henry's side, his confidant. It didn't take long for Megan to make her exit from the office. She'd packed her bags and was out the door in less than an hour. Phoebe didn't look back, didn't call, and didn't even leave a note. She'd aligned herself with the new power structure, and now that Henry had lost his, she had no reason to stay. Days blurred into weeks, and Henry felt the weight of each passing hour. The apartment, once filled with luxury and laughter, now felt cold and unfamiliar. He had lost everything that defined him, his job, his wealth, his reputation. Megan, on the other hand, was absolutely thriving. She was restructuring the company, implementing changes that Henry had never even thought of making. Her amazing leadership brought in a multi-million-dollar contract, which was something Henry had only dreamed of. As the company's profits soared, so did Megan's confidence. She was no longer the timid woman Henry had once belittled. She was the woman who had outwitted him, outplayed him and taken everything he held dear. Henry kept a respectful distance from the action, feeling a growing sense of distance from the life he once knew. With every new article and mention of Megan's achievements, he couldn't help but feel a hint of bitterness in his heart. He had built the company with his ambition, but it was Megan's quiet determination that had turned it into an empire. It was a shame he couldn't be part of it anymore, but he could still see it from the outside through news feeds and whispered conversations. One day, as he was walking aimlessly through the streets, he passed the company's towering headquarters. His eyes lingered on the name of the building, which now bore Megan's name in bold letters. It felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He had built this amazing legacy, and yet he was nothing more than a forgotten chapter in its history. The weight of his mistakes was pressing down on him, and for the first time, Henry understood the depth of his downfall. He had been a bit blinded by his pride and his need for control. Now he was stripped of everything, left with nothing but the echoes of his past and the cold reality of a future shaped by the very woman he had underestimated. That was Henry's story, a costly lesson in arrogance and underestimating others. As we reflect on all that, we can empathize with him. He has lost everything and all that Megan has achieved. It's so easy to fall into the same trap of pride and complacency, isn't it? If this story has made you think or given you a new perspective, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. We'd love it if you could hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future videos. Let's keep sharing these thought-provoking stories and learn from life's mistakes together. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.